locked in.
Look at what we have here, folks.
To the only show that matters.
The cream of the crop.
Duke loves wrestling.
And there is no one that does it better than
your host.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
The Duke.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Friday, the 27th of June, 2019. A day that will live in pro wrestling infamy. You better believe it, Jack. Welcome back to Duke Loves Rasslin, the show about pro wrestling and everything else. I am the man of the hour, the man with the power, too sweet to be sour, the Duke. And I'm pretty pumped. I'm pretty pumped because this wrestling news that's been going on over the past week and even continuing to break as we speak, folks, it's just amazing. It's crazy. In fact, we're going to have the man, Raj Giri, from the #1 pro wrestling news site, Wrestling Inc. He's going to be joining us soon to break down a lot of the top stories and really just dig into this stuff from a historical perspective. We also have some listener-submitted content. O'Brien C., he sent a pretty good voice message to dukeloveswrestling@gmail.com. You know, you got to send me these things here, folks. Once again, dukeloveswrestling@gmail.com. You can send your comments. You can send audio clips. And, hey, we'll put it on the show. We'll put it on the show. We'll give you a shout out. You know, share your thoughts. And if your thoughts are really, really good, I may even invite you onto the show at a later time, I should say. So, you know, Brian C., well, we'll have to listen and hear what he has to say there. Interesting guy. Also, Turnbuckle Chick. Turnbuckle Chick gave me a green light to post some comments that she's made recently about what's going on in the wrestling world. So I'm going to do that a little later on. So stay tuned for that. But, you know, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Before we get to any of that stuff, let me go over a couple of top stories because let me tell you something. We are not short on that. Not this week, folks. First things first, one of the craziest stories I've seen in a long time. Tommy Dreamer. Everybody remember Tommy Dreamer? You know, he has that House of Hardcore promotion that he has, and they also have a podcast. He was in ECW, WWE, still does work with Impact, and I know he's done some stuff with Ring of Honor. Tommy's been around. Tommy's been around all over the place, right? On his House of Hardcore podcast, Tommy Dreamer revealed that he once considered killing Paul Heyman and himself at WrestleMania 17. What? Tommy said he was gonna jump the guardrail and shoot Heyman and shoot himself, and that was gonna be a big thing. This is what depression had manifested into. You know, Tommy was 29 years old. ECW had folded, so he lost his job. He lost his prospects. You know, he could have signed with WCW for big money, and WWE was still not doing anything with him yet. Just he was at a breaking point, man, and he was gonna not only was gonna break, he was gonna snap. It's a hell of a thing to admit. And Tommy said it was actually a phone call from Jim Ross, where Ross just told him, hang in there, you know, WWE hasn't forgotten about him and they're still thinking about him and they're going to use him. Hang in there. He said that's what kind of snapped him out of it. Gave him hope, I guess. Wow. That's a reminder that we don't know what people are going through, and just be careful out there, folks. Be careful with yourselves. Be careful with the folks you interact with. I mean, this guy was, you know, he felt like he had no other choices. He was legitimately going to do one of the craziest things that we would have ever seen in our lifetime. Thank God he didn't. But, boy, what a thing to admit. So, again, Tommy Dreamer, you can listen to his House of Hardcore podcast, which is tied to his wrestling promotion of the same name. You know, hear more. But, jeez. Paulie, you know, there's always somebody out there who says they want to beat the hell out of Paulie or do something worse to him. He really played with people's emotions in that ECW, but, you know, good thing everybody came out the other side, because I'll tell you, whew, imagine a wrestling world without Paulie. I can't. We call him Paul Heyman today. That's his real name. But Paulie Dangerously, Paulie, whatever. He's a creative genius. Imagine not having that guy. Oof. So, that was something else there. Another thing that's something else is Impact Wrestling. You know, they're on the Pursuit channel, which is available on DirecTV and AT&T, what have you. Well, those two mediums are dropping Pursuit, which I don't even know how much that matters because Pursuit barely shows TNA, or Impact, I should say, properly and on a regular basis anyway. It just, later on I'm going to talk to Raj Giri about this because he's the wrestling news guy. What the heck, man? Will this be the end of Impact Wrestling? Will this be it? I know they're on Twitch, but is that good enough? Do they have another TV deal? Like, what's going on here? I don't know. But here's a promotion that's been around for, about 20 years now. And they've presented themselves as an alternative to WWE, and they've done the best that they can, I guess. They've had 1,000,001 hiccups. But every time we think they're down and out, they manage to bounce right back. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens here. Another interesting thing out there, Harvard Business School, so that's in Cambridge, Massachusetts, they're going to be doing a case study on the business of WWE. Now, that gets my dander up in a good way because, hey, listen, I'm all about the business of WWE. I'm all about the economics of WWE. I think they're one of the most historic companies in the history of our entire nation and really the world. In fact, you should check out our episode from last week. I talked to the guy over there from Wrestlenomics about the business of WWE and learned a lot and certainly gave it right back there. Brandon Thurston, good guy from Wrestlenomics. We talked all about that stuff. So this class being offered, or this case study happening at Harvard, this is interesting. I wonder what it's going to reveal. I'm sure other universities and schools are going to follow suit because, look, man, a company to last this long and to make as much money as consistently as they are, somebody needs to study that and figure out how it happened and see if we can replicate that in other areas. Why not? Something crazy here. Something really crazy. Fans advised to get tested for HIV and hepatitis C after Extreme Indy Event. So I saw this on Wrestling Inc., but also the News and Tribune, which is, this is out of Indiana, New Albany, Indiana. Fans who attended the Pro Wrestling Trainwreck promotion's Welcome to the Rec Room. Now, that was an indie event that happened on Sunday, June 23rd in New Albany, Indiana. They may have been exposed to bloodborne pathogens and should be tested for HIV and hepatitis C. They put out a press release about this, man. You hardcore fans are really something else to me. You love that blood and guts stuff. And, there was a time when I was younger where I was into that stuff a little bit. But Jesus, you got wrestlers bleeding all over the place and possibly bleeding on you. You think that's okay? It's dangerous, man. And this ain't WWE. I would trust that WWE tests their wrestlers for, blood work and all that other good stuff. I don't trust some random hardcore fed to be doing that. Call me crazy. Clearly they didn't. I hope nobody was exposed to this stuff and comes down with anything as a result. This is just bizarre, scary. Some things are just not necessary. That's what I say to that. Moving on. AEW Fyter Fest. Now, this is a pay-per-view event that you can catch for free on BR Live. Now, that's the streaming service offered by Bleacher Report. I mentioned this before. But that's happening on the 29th, which I believe is Saturday. So you got to check that out there. Fighter Fest. We went over the matches a little bit. Cody versus Darby Allin and John Moxley versus Joey Janela. I guess that's going to be a non-sanctioned match, by the way. Whatever that means. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. I'm excited about one of the women's matches. Yuka Suzuki and Rio and Nyla Rose, they're going to be the three-way match. I think that's going to be exciting. Kylie Ray's taking on Leva Bates. That'll be interesting as well. So, I don't know. Hopefully it'll be a good pay-per-view event. I'll be watching. I'll be eating ribs. Maybe have a beer. AEW's got to do something, man. They better do something. Because, and moving on to the next topic, WWE did Stomping Grounds, which a lot of people were talking about the poor attendance and how WWE had to black off certain points so the cameras wouldn't pick it up and all that other garbage. It was a solid pay-per-view, Stomping Grounds. It was a solid pay-per-view, okay? I'll tell you that right now. I'll tell you, Heavy Machinery, they were in a match against the Planet's Tag Team Champions. The Planet's Tag Team Champions. And, for my money, it was one of the best matches I've seen all year. What Daniel Bryan and Eric Rowan were able to do during that match, the way that they were able to allow Heavy Machinery to get all of their stuff in and look like $1 million and yet come out looking like strong tag team champions. Solid win on their part, retaining the titles. It just, I can't stress enough. You got to see that match. It's a great match. Great match. Stomping Grounds was a solid pay-per-view, man. I'm telling you right now, it was solid. It did not have a lot of hype. Maybe it was lacking in fan interest, but it was solid. I mean, from match one, Drew Gulak, Tony Nese, and Tozawa. Gulak won that match and ended up becoming the WWE Cruiserweight Champion. Becky Lynch and Lacey Evans, there were some missed spots by Lacey in that, but overall, that was a very good match in its own right. Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, they took on Big E and Xavier Woods. Another great match, man. Just a great match. Ricochet, Samoa Joe. Ricochet ended up winning the U.S. Championship. Those two were perfect with each other. I mean, a perfect pairing. Don't sleep on Samoa Joe, man. That dude can go with anybody. He's great. Bayley versus Alexa Bliss was another solid match. Alexa put on a clinic during that match. That was just, seeing Alexa Bliss back in the ring was just a sight to behold. She is just so good. So good, which, I've been saying that all along on this show. Roman Reigns versus Drew McIntyre, it was what it was. It wasn't bad. It was pretty good. Kofi and Dolph Ziggler, it was a cage match that ended excellently. And great effort by both guys, but at this point, I think the crowd was starting to get a little tired. Nonetheless, it was still a solid match. Rollins versus Baron Corbin, that was a no disqualification match. And it involved Lacey Evans and Becky Lynch. They got involved at some point. Listen, wasn't the greatest match of all time, but it wasn't the worst either. It was another solid effort. Stomping Grounds was good, man. Don't let anybody tell you any differently. So, WWE, they're on a roll. Got to watch out for them. Because the Raw afterwards was solid. SmackDown was solid. It's like, hey, we're here to party, baby. Speaking of Raw and SmackDown, it was announced today Paul Heyman will be taking over as the head of Raw, and Eric Bischoff will be taking over as the head of SmackDown. Vince McMahon took two people who competed with him during what's fondly considered one of the greatest periods in pro wrestling history The guy that ran WCW and Eric Bischoff, and the guy who ran ECW and Paul Heyman, he just put them both in charge of his two major shows. If you're AEW, if you're New Japan Pro Wrestling, if you're any other promotion, you should be very worried. The most talented people behind the scenes in pro wrestling work for WWE. Vince McMahon, obviously. His family, obviously. That includes Triple H. But he hired back Bruce Pritchard. Paul Heyman was already under contract, but he has him in a creative capacity now. And he just brought back Eric Bischoff. Who saw that coming? I don't even think Bischoff saw that coming. This is amazing. Like, this is this is truly fascinating. This is fascinating stuff, man. And listen, don't take my word for it. We can hear from a fan. Let's have a fan tell you how they feel about it.
All right, so I was called upon to give my opinions on the Eric Bischoff and Paul Heyman named WWE executive directors. My opinion on the matter. Listen, I think it's obviously good news. I mean, in my opinion, anything these guys touch turns into gold, especially Heyman. Obviously Heyman was involved as the ECW president, I want to say, from the early 90s to 2001. I mean, the guy took the company to crazy heights on pay-per-view. And I believe they had the national cable TV deal with TNN. I mean, this guy is a genius. I mean, let's just leave it at that. He's also a must-see attraction on TV with Brock Lesnar. I mean, he's phenomenal. Paul Heyman is phenomenal. Eric Bischoff, you could say what you want. The guy did have an igniting factor behind one of the biggest factions ever in the NWO. The bottom line is WWE had to make a splash. It seems like everything they've been doing is negative, and everything that AEW has been doing is positive. Now, look, I'm for everything, man. I'm for the AEW. I'm for WWE. If you really watch WWE, the last couple weeks have been fine on Raw. Raw this past week, they had Daniel Bryan, they had the War Raiders against Anderson and Gallows. That was a fine match. They teased the Finn Balor and Shinsuke. I believe it was on SmackDown. But, Raw, for the most part, Raw was fine. Now they have Samoa Joe in the picture with Kofi Kingston. Everybody wanted Joe to get pushed. Now he's getting pushed. So what's the problem now? There always seems to be a problem. So with Heyman and Bischoff, what is the negative going to be? Well, they still have to answer to Vince McMahon. You know what? I would still rather them two guys be sitting next to Vince McMahon when he has to make his decisions than them two guys not sitting next to Vince McMahon when he has to make his final decisions. The bottom line is, it's good for WWE, it's good for wrestling, it's good for the competition. It's just going to bring out the WWE in a better light. That's all it's going to do. If you are for the AEW and WWE both competing and both being in the wrestling market, this is a positive. It seems like the WWE is finally taking things more seriously. Like I said, the roster is loaded. The problem with the WWE is that the talent on the roster is just loaded. Okay? I mean, you got guys on a weekly basis like Drew McIntyre who's hanging on. He's hanging on to TV time by just being a bodyguard for Shane McMahon. All right? You got guys that can't even get in the ring. I mean, I know Bray Wyatt, they're teasing. Aleister Black, they're teasing. But the bottom line is they're still not in the ring. You know what I'm saying? Shinsuke Nakamura is doing house shows, is doing dark matches against Finn Balor, who's the Intercontinental Champion. You know, when was the last time you went a month and a half without the Intercontinental Champion on TV? You know, the two-brand split, it's just, the roster is so packed. Now they're finally pushing Ricochet. You know, Cesaro, I would have thought was going to get a push. I think he got injured there for a while. Everybody can't get pushed in the WWE. You know, that's where the fans get it wrong. The fans think that everybody could get pushed. You know, there's not even enough titles to go around. And I like it like that. Titles mean something. There shouldn't be 15 titles on one show. You know, the titles are perfect how they are. You know, I just think they needed some more brains in there. And not just brains with a background of writing and drama and wherever they get these guys, these writers from. They needed guys with a wrestling background. And obviously Paul Heyman, which if I'm not mistaken, he took over SmackDown a while ago. And, you know, I think he did a pretty good job when he took over SmackDown. But obviously this is a positive thing for the WWE. And no matter what the negative critics say, they can say whatever they want. At the end of the day, WWE is going to be fine. AEW will most likely be fine. And it's going to be fun. You know, it's going to be fun the months to come. Alrighty, that's all I really got to say. And like I said, you know, back to the WWE, the roster, you know, NXT is even pushing guys to come up like Adam Cole. Like I was saying, guys can't even get in the ring. Imagine if Adam Cole was pushed up. Imagine Gargano being pushed up. Imagine Velveteen Dream being pushed up. They can't even get all the guys on the main roster now TV time. All right? And you know what? As for Shane McMahon, I disagree with a lot of the critics with what they have to say about Shane. You know, if more wrestlers on the roster took bumps, first off, Shane McMahon's 50 years old. If their matches were more like Shane McMahon's matches, and they took bumps like he takes, you know, the ratings might be a little bit better. You know, I'm all for not putting Shane on Raw and SmackDown. I think the promos are a little too much on both. Promos, you know, he comes out, he talks on Raw 20 minutes, he comes out, he talks SmackDown 20 minutes. It's a little overboard. You know, you could give that time to another, you know, another wrestler, another competitor, that's fine. But as for Shane's matches, his matches are fine. You know, like I said, this guy's 50 years old. He could take a bump. You know, I mean, I remember the match at Wrestlemania with The Miz. You know, he took a bump off the golf cart. It was just like it wasn't even a big bump. The big bump was coming off of the suplex when he won the match. He took a bump off the golf cart that would have been a finale in some of these guys' matches. And it was just like an everyday bump. So as for Shane, Shane's fine. You know, they make fun of his punches. You know, sometimes he's not great on the mic. I think he's fine. But, you know, as for Shane, his matches are absolutely fine. All right, I'm not saying the guy's a world-class elite wrestler. But the guy is a fine heel. And he could put on a match. Another thing is Baron Corbin. You know, I agree with one of the podcasters. He had to say that, you know, there's go-away heat and there's regular heat. You know, it's all stupid shit. The bottom line is Baron Corbin has heat. Baron Corbin is an excellent heel. Go-away heat. Nobody likes the guy. The guy gets booed crazy. I actually like Baron Corbin. All right? It's heat. Baron Corbin is doing an excellent job in his role at the WWE and he's doing a phenomenal job. Lacey Evans, you know, they say she's green. You know, she botches a lot of moves. But a couple of the women in the women's division botch moves. You know, I used to see Sasha Banks botch moves. You know, I even see Charlotte a couple times. Asuka, she could botch every now and then. You know, Lacey's got to get better, I have to admit. But her on the mic is fine. She was fine in NXT. You know, I think this is actually going to be a good match. Lacey and Corbin against Seth and Becky. You know, I would put the titles on Corbin and Lacey Evans. I think the world would go insane. The internet, the critics, WWE would blow up if they put the titles on Baron Corbin and Lacey Evans. And you don't got to put it on them for a while. Maybe a couple weeks, maybe until SummerSlam. You know, call it a cheap pop. Call it whatever you want. But that's going to draw eyes. If Baron Corbin and Lacey Evans beat Becky Lynch and Seth Rollins, given they cheat, given it's an unfair, how the outcome, even if Brock Lesnar gets involved, however you want to make it. But that would pop. And that the Twitter universe would go insane if that ever happened. All right? Thank you for letting me be a part of the podcast, dude. And I'll catch you later.
That was Brian C. Shout out to Brian. Good stuff there, man. Here's a guy who's a fan, a big fan, and he's excited about the prospect of Eric Bischoff and Paul Heyman being part of the WWE team. And here's the thing. Those two guys only have to report to Vince McMahon. They don't have to listen to anybody else, just Vince McMahon. How cool is that? That means Eric can do what he needs to do with SmackDown, and Paul Heyman can do what he needs to do with Raw. And Vince is the final say, and that's fine, but they don't have to deal with the nonsense of anybody else. That's pretty cool. Brian is at the Kid, KIDD 973. So that's at THEKIDD 973. Shout out to Brian. Brian C, good guy. I'm excited about this Bischoff and Paul Heyman thing. In fact, I need a little bit more information on this. So let's just stop playing games here. Let's get our man Raj on the line here, and let's really dissect this and get some more info.
So like I said, folks, with all of the amazing, crazy stuff going on today in the wrestling world, I figured, something? Let me do right by the listeners. Let me go out and get somebody who can really provide some expert analysis and some perspective from a historical sense on all this stuff. So, from the number one wrestling news website in the world, the man, the myth, the legend, welcome back to Duke Loves Rasslin, Mr. Raj Giri. What's going on, Raj?
Not much. How about, well, actually a lot. How about yourself?
Dude, my head is about to explode because I don't know what shoe is going to drop next. Things have been going so crazy.
Yeah, it's been unpredictable. I woke up today thinking that it was going to be a slow news day. I had all these articles I was planning on pushing that, were kind of in the queue. We kind of keep some, just in case there are slower news days, ones that aren't so time specific to kind of push out there, to get content out when things are slower. But, that was not the case today.
Certainly not. So let's just jump into this here. We see the breaking news that WWE has assigned Paul Heyman to Raw, and they've assigned Eric Bischoff to SmackDown Live. Can you give us a little more detail on what specifically these guys are going to be doing and just what the response has been to this news?
Well, this is obviously very, very new, but, it's, hold on one second. Let me pull something up here. So apparently, the deal with Bischoff was, rather recent. Paul Heyman, I guess they've been talking with for a while. So they are going to be the executive directors of Raw and SmackDown, respectively. It's interesting because one thing I found really interesting is, Paul Heyman, he's had experience working in the WWE system. He was the head of creative and, in the early noughts. He butted heads with Stephanie a lot. Eventually lost his position and was never really brought back in. I mean, he's been helping a lot backstage as far as helping out with promos, giving advice, giving creative tips, but no official role. So he's been in the WWE system before. At one point it was thought he would never be again, but here he is and in charge of Raw before he was, in charge of SmackDown, at least creatively. Bischoff has never been in a backstage role. He's always been an on-screen talent. So we're talking 20 years after, his real, rise to the top in WCW, a little over 20 years after his rise to the top and not really having a major office position since his TNA days. So, it's a big leap of faith that WWE is taking. given that Bischoff has never worked with them in that capacity. So it'll be interesting to see. Bischoff, he is the one guy that has been able to beat Vince McMahon. Did it for 83 weeks, as we all know. Just made the Monday Night Wars one of the highlights of any wrestling fan that watched it back then will probably say that was their favorite era. So it's very interesting. But ultimately, Vince McMahon is still in charge. They're both going to be reporting to Vince. Apparently Bischoff will also be working with executives from Fox as SmackDown moves to Fox this October. But, it's a very interesting position.
That's interesting that you said, apparently Bischoff is going to be working with executives from Fox on this. I mean, we know that, Bischoff has a pretty extensive work history dealing with networks, not just in pro wrestling, but he's sold reality TV shows and things of that nature. What are your thoughts on the fact that he's going to be working so closely with executives on, a new television property that's coming to their station?
I mean, we'll have to see. I mean, ultimately the main deal is done. So it's, I guess, getting their feedback, changes they might want, things like that, and reporting them back to Vince. But, he does have that experience working with, executives at TNT, TBS. He's worked on a lot of different other shows and different other projects. He's been working with Netflix on a Hulk Hogan biography film. So he has that experience working with, television executives. So, as far as him, I'm sure that's the reason why he's on SmackDown and Heyman is on Raw. But it makes sense.
How does this affect the overall landscape in pro wrestling? Because, I mean, we have AEW, which they're ramping up. They're gearing up for their debut on TNT, which is in October. But, they're putting on more shows. We have Fyter Fest coming up this weekend. New Japan is continuing to do what they can to penetrate the American market. How does taking two veteran executives in pro wrestling, Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff, how does that affect everything else?
Well, Heyman, as we all have seen in the past, or anyone that's been watching wrestling for a long period of time, Heyman is great at pushing younger talent and creating characters and giving younger guys opportunities. And that's something that's kind of been lacking lately. So from a creative sense, that's something that could be a huge deal. Ultimately, overall, we've seen creative shakeups many times. I mean, just last December, we had the McMahon family out there, Triple H, and they're talking about how the fans are now the authority and they're going to be listening to the fans, and did this babyface promo about how everything's going to change, and everything went back to the way it was, because ultimately, Vince is, the man on top. We'll have to see, but I don't see Vince wanting major changes to how the show is formatted, just the way that they do business, how they start off with an in-ring promo and just the lighting and the set and the look and how produced the show is. I don't see Vince wanting to make any changes on those fronts. So we'll just have to see. If we go by history, many times that they've said that they were going to have creative shakeups, and they kind of ended up reverting back to where they were within a few months or even shorter than that. So we'll have to see.
Do you think today's moves with Heyman and Bischoff, do you think these are moves by WWE in order to combat any potential moves happening with AEW, or do you feel that this was going to happen anyway, especially with Vince allegedly taking a step back, taking more of a role with the XFL, which is about to launch?
Well, it is interesting that Triple H isn't filling one of those roles. I thought, he's been running NXT for a while now. NXT has a great underground following. It's not mainstream, obviously, but it does have a great following with wrestling fans. So that part I thought was very interesting. Vince McMahon has a lot on his plate. The XFL is about to launch in January. He's invested a ton of money into this. He's looking at, you're looking at pretty much close to $500,000 a year is what it's looking like. So, he can't be doing everything. So, yeah, so bringing in Bischoff and Heyman to fill those roles, takes a lot off his plate, but ultimately he's still the man in charge. and they are going to be reporting to him.
You know, it's interesting timing that we get this news today. That AEW has Fyter Fest happening this weekend, which is a free show that's going to be on the Bleacher Report, their app. Is this just an affront to establish, hey, we're the big dog in the wrestling industry. We can do these things and legitimately steal your shine? Because at this point, everyone's talking about WWE. I
Today,
very little chatter about a pay-per-view that legitimately is happening on Saturday. It's all about WWE. Is this?
Yeah, it definitely. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, do you feel this is coincidental? Because I mean, you're the top news guy. You're reporting on this stuff. Does it seem like there's a trend here where WWE is being very targeted and specific with the timing of this news dropping, even with the whole Seth Rollins, talking trash online, establishing that he's the big dog in the industry or what have you? Is this stuff coincidental, or do you feel that this is strategic with the timing?
Well, with WWE, they know a lot about timing. They could have easily held this off until next Monday or Tuesday. So I'm sure, I don't know this, but I'm sure it was done ahead of AEW's second show to take the shine off a little bit and get people talking about this. But yeah, I mean, AEW, it's not necessarily a pay-per-view. It is overseas for, people in the U.S. It is free. It's not one of their bigger shows, but yeah, this does definitely get people talking about something else.
What are your thoughts about WWE airing the Evolve show on the WWE network? So here we have essentially an indie promotion that they do have business dealings with, but they're going to be putting them on the WWE network in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be going head to head with an established AEW pay-per-view at the same time.
Yeah, so come on, that's not a coincidence. WWE has been working with Progress, Evolve, for forever. And they've been talking about, airing their shows, for as long as I can remember. I mean, it's been on their, conference calls, many times, but they've never done it. And then the one time they decide to do it is when AEW has a show that night. Now, Evolve did have this date picked, before Fight for the Fallen had been announced, but for WWE to choose to stream it and headline it with a lot of NXT stars, it's definitely not a coincidence. And you know what? That's how they do business, and there's nothing wrong with that. WCW would do that with WWE. I mean, they aired their flagship show head to head with Raw, and it led to a boom period. So, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. That's competition.
We're talking to Raj Giri from the #1 wrestling news website, Rasslin Inc. Raj, what is your take on this whole Seth Rollins, Will Ospreay stuff that's happened over the last couple of days? Because, it just seems like, at least on social media, fans are definitely choosing sides. Some agreeing with Rollins that, he should establish that he's the big guy because he's in the WWE and he is a champion. And then you have folks saying he did the wrong thing by saying, look at my bank account, and using that as a measurable to prove that he's bigger than everyone else, especially Will Ospreay. What's your take on that whole thing?
Well, I think, I felt like Rollins was just defending the company. It had been a rough few weeks for WWE as far as their attendance went. The buzz for Stomping Grounds was probably the lowest for a pay-per-view I can recall. The attendance at their shows this week were at all-time lows for Raw and SmackDown. So I'm sure, and Seth Rollins is the guy on top, so I'm sure it's getting to him. He wants to be a company guy. He wants to be the guy. And, defending the company, I don't see anything wrong with that. And, when he's clearly heated and tweeting and going on this tirade, Ospreay interjecting, I mean, you can almost expect, Rollins to reply with something not so flattering. And I know some people are dissecting Rollins' tweet like, hey, well, Will Ospreay had more matches this year. Well, Rollins never said this year. He's saying night in, night out over time. I mean, it could be 3 years, 5 years, whatever. It's not meant to be taken so literal. But what Rollins meant is at a top level, and which is mean by seen by millions and millions of people, and what he does, he feels like no one else does that. I see nothing wrong with that. And now the bank account thing is a little petty, but who cares? I mean, I just don't think it's a big deal. It's Twitter. It's not like he's driving to his house confronting him, like they used to do in the old days.
Isn't that the truth? And hey, who knows who would win in that battle there?
Right.
Overall, is all of this stuff good or not so good for the wrestling industry and even for we the fans who are watching? Is this good stuff?
I think it's great. I mean, this is wrestling. It's not ballet. It's not, where you're worried about sportsmanship or someone, you know what I mean? Like, it's when there's competition. I mean, you can only imagine what social media would have been like if it was around during the Monday Night Wars era, I mean, it would have just been insane, and the stuff Bischoff would have been tweeting, and I mean, I just feel like it drives interest to fans. I mean, there's a lot of fans who probably didn't know much about Will Ospreay before this week, and now they do. So I think it just makes it interesting. And we are gearing up for a war between WWE and AEW this fall. So I just think this stuff's fascinating, and it makes things more interesting. So I find nothing wrong with it.
A year from now, what are we going to be talking about? If you had a crystal ball and you could predict, are we going to be talking about WWE and AEW or any other promotion in terms of a war, or are things going to fizzle out and we're just going to have an established company like we have been dealing with for over 20 years now, where it's like, at the end of the day, it's still a big dog?
Well, I've never seen a period where there's just so many intangibles, right? Like you've got the XFL. How is that going to affect things? Will that be a success at all? Will that be a big failure? If it's a success, how does that affect the wrestling business? How does it move to Fox? Right now the ratings, we've talked about this, and we'll have a longer talk at, some other point, but the ratings right now are not at an all-time low. What happens when they move to Fox on Friday nights? They're going to get a bump by being on Fox, but they're also going to drop by being on Friday nights. Does the popularity continue to decrease? If it does, how does Fox handle that? There's just so many intangibles. AEW, is it just, 500,000 or so fans that are willing to, fly out to these events and, buy tickets? And can they expand beyond that? Or have they already? Is there already more of an interest? We don't really know yet. Right now, they have a hardcore fan that's buying tickets at an unprecedented pace. But we don't know how that'll translate once they have weekly shows. I mean, they're not going to be, those fans are not going to be spending all this money every week. And so they got to create new fans. And how will TNT and TBS be promoting, TNT, Turner be promoting AEW ahead of its debut? Will the product be mainstream enough, or is it too hardcore, too inside, and then too catered towards hardcore wrestling fans? So, this is like last year, it was easy, to look in the crystal ball and kind of see where we're at, This year, I really can't. I have no idea. And it's fascinating. I think this fall, from this fall on, it's going to be the most fascinating period in pro wrestling since the Monday Night Wars, or, since WWE purchased WCW.
Yeah, I have to agree with you 100%. It's just the anticipation and the excitement is through the roof right now, and it's like, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? Which can only, at least in the short term, translate into more people watching, especially the first time it's on TV. This might become appointment television again, as opposed to I'll catch it online or I'll catch it on the DVR or something like that.
And there is one thing with SmackDown moving to Fox in October. that marks 20 years of SmackDown. So they could really load that show up like they did with Raw 25, the Raw 1000. I mean, really load it up and get a ton of people tuning in. I mean, when they did that with Raw, was it Raw 25 last year, 2 years ago? I think it was last January. They did like 4.5 million viewers, like way beyond anything they've done in recent memory. And I think with Paul Heyman in charge, one of the problems with Raw 25 is they showcased a lot of the old guys, but didn't interact with the younger guys and get younger guys over and create a big angle to get those 4.5 million who are tuning in that normally don't tune in to want to tune in the following week. I think Paul Heyman will take advantage of that big audience that they're going to have. So, Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff will be in charge of SmackDown, but I think he'll want to take advantage of that. So hopefully we'll see.
Good call. Hey, real quick, switching speeds here. Impact Wrestling. I mean, I checked out Wrestling Inc. and I saw that I believe it's DirecTV and AT&T are dropping the Pursuit channel. Impact has 50 million lives here. Are we getting to a point where we've seen the end, or do you expect them to bounce back again?
Well, I mean, we recently spoke with Conan, who says they got another TV deal in the works, and until it's announced, we won't know. Their deal with Pursuit is up, I believe, at the end of this year. So, I mean, this Pursuit deal has been a disaster. I mean, really, Impact is the best show no one's watching. They're probably putting out quality-wise some of their best product they've done in a long time, but again, no one's watching it right now. So they really need out of this Pursuit deal. They need some sort of TV deal. Whether it's, Viceland is doing their wrestling shows now. I mean, if they paired those up with an episode of Impact Wrestling every week, I think that'd benefit both. But, again, people have been talking about the death of TNA Impact for, pretty much since it formed. And like he says, 50 lives. So, if you're a betting man, they probably have one more in there somewhere.
That was an interesting take there, Raj Giri, talking about Viceland. That would be crazy for any wrestling promotion to land a deal with them and do a weekly program with them. Jeez. Yeah,
Viceland doesn't have much reach, but it definitely has way more than Pursuit. And they were doing 200,000 plus viewers for the Dark Sides of the Dark Tales of the Ring or Dark Side of the Ring shows that they were doing. So. They can pull in, hundreds of thousands of viewers, and that's a good start.
Good call. Raj, tell everybody about Wrestling Inc. and what they can expect and why they need to make that, if they haven't already, their first stop for wrestling news.
We're 24/7, always on top of the breaking news. We have lots of fun features, lots of fun interviews. We got Kevin Von Erich coming up next week, a rare interview. He rarely does them. We have tons of exclusive interviews each week. All the breaking news. I mean, if you go to the site and then go a few hours later, it's like 10 different articles since the last time you were there. So it's just we try to make it as fun of an experience for pro wrestling fans as we can. And, we just try to be fun, but while providing news, also, this is sports entertainment, and we also try to be entertaining and have fun features and things like that in our comment section, which can get nuts. But, definitely check us out.
Well, I'll say this, Raj Giri, and anyone who's listened to Duke Loves Wrestling through the years is no surprise. I am a avid fan of Wrestling Inc. and just Raj Giri. Even before that, just the product that you put out, I think you do a really great job. And I'm going to say this on the air and give you kudos. You signed one of the biggest free agents in pro wrestling media a little over a year ago. I believe it was last March when you signed Nick Hausman.
Yeah,
and
correct.
You guys together, just that combination has been something I don't think we've ever really seen before. And it really shows in the product. Your website, you don't allow it to get stale. You're constantly reinventing. You're constantly putting out more content and putting out original content as well. And I can speak from experience. If Wrestling Inc. covers something on Duke Loves Wrestling, everybody else is going to cover it. that's why you guys are number one. You're really setting the pace. So keep up the great work, and I appreciate you coming back on.
Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate it, and thanks for having me on.
And there it is. I mean, that's straight from the number one news website, Wrestling Inc. You know, the guy that runs it, Raj Giri. Solid dude. When you listen to Raj talk about pro wrestling, it's easy to understand why his website is so successful. There's a lot of credibility in what he talks about. He's clear when he's giving his opinion. And he's clear when he's expressing facts. And there's a lot of historical understanding of the business to go along with that stuff. So that bothers me, that there are so many out there that just don't have those types of ethics and integrity. And unfortunately, they're pretty good at misleading the masses. So I tip my hat to Raj and his team over there. You know, those guys do it the right way. That doesn't mean I agree all the time with Raj in Wrestling Inc. You check us out on Twitter and you'll see we'll debate till the cows come home on anything. Just because that's the way it is, you know. I think Raj believes that there's a correlation between the TV ratings and WWE possibly not being in as good a shape as the numbers would suggest, at least the bottom line. And I don't subscribe to that theory. I think at the end of the day, the job of a business is to make money. And WWE is making not just making money, but they're producing record profits. And they've set themselves up to continue to do that for years to come. So how much trouble could they be in if that's the case? And with these moves with Heyman and Eric Bischoff, man, they're in pretty good shape. Pretty good shape. You know, something was brought up while I was talking to Raj. Seth Rollins and some comments he made online, and Will Ospreay, who's a New Japan Pro Wrestling signed wrestler. Now, he's a Brit. Will Ospreay, he took exception to some of Rollins' comments, and they had a little back and forth and whatever. Rollins said he's the best in the world, basically, and show me anyone alive who does what I do day in and day out as well as I do it. Ospreay said, I'm alive. Rollins called him little guy. And, you know, Ospreay said, I worked more matches than you over the past year. Rollins said, I had a bad back, and yeah, I work less than you, but I make more money than you. Now, some people have taken strong offense to that. Raj Giri said he's okay with it. But not everyone's okay with it. There is a wrestling fan / influencer by the name of Turnbuckle Chick. She's on Twitter literally at Turnbuckle Chick, you know, like the wrestling turnbuckle. TURNBUCKLECHICK. Turnbuckle Chick. She's a fun follow, man. I mean, she really knows her stuff. She's connected to a lot of wrestlers, especially indie wrestlers. She does a lot of videos and what have you. You know, she has her days. She has some kind of medical issue where some days she's really not feeling too well. And today is actually one of those days. Nonetheless, she felt compelled to put out a video expressing her feelings on the whole Seth Rollins and Will Ospreay stuff. And I want you folks to hear it. I think it's definitely worth listening to, and you should check out her page, give her a follow, and watch some of her videos as well. She's an interesting person with a lot to say. So I'm gonna play Turnbuckle Chick's take on this Seth Rollins, Will Ospreay stuff, and after that, I'm gonna share my thoughts.
People are asking me about this whole feud between Rollins and Ospreay, and I was gonna wait until later, and I might, but First thing is, you gotta know that when people say things and they're in WWE, first of all, it's written. Like, WWE is not just gonna let people say whatever they want. Okay? It's just how it is. Yeah. I'm sick. My hair hasn't been brushed. I haven't brushed my teeth. I'm sorry, guys. Second of all, yeah, this feud is just, it's pathetic. And it just, the last text that Rollins sent, or tweet, let me say that right, tweet. It just ended up making Rollins look really pathetic, because it ended up with him talking about money. And if anyone ends up falling back on money as opposed to talent, it just comes off as pathetic, period. Pathetic, and as if you have no self-confidence. And I love Rollins. I love Seth Rollins. I love Will Ospreay. I've seen them both lots of times in person wrestle. I've met both of them. It's right here. Well, actually, they're healing. But, guys, I just suggest you guys read the Twitter feud, and of all the writers that work with WWE, they could have come up with a better way to end it with Rollins, because it just makes him end on a pathetic note. Yeah, you're making more money, but you're working for a company that has been the monopoly for how long? So I think anybody who works there is probably going to be making more than anybody else who doesn't. Period. Then read, Ospreay did get the last word in. Read it. And he almost gets the higher ground. He pretty much does. Not only that, he also made 2 shirts out of it, and it's on ProWrestlingTees.com, so check it out. I would say Will Ospreay 1, Rollins 0, but Will Ospreay 2, because he won on Twitter, I think, and then he got 2 shirts on Pro Wrestling Tees out of this. So now I'm going to say, and this is, Josh, my boyfriend Josh, brought this up. So the Pro Wrestling Tees thing, and thank you, Josh. I'm giving this one to you. So Will Ospreay 2 because of that. Rollins 0. Okay. Bye, everybody.
The beauty about the pro wrestling community and wrestling fans, we're a passionate bunch. And we definitely have plenty to say. As you heard, Turnbuckle Chick, she has plenty to say on this. She feels strongly about what Seth Rollins was saying and how he was representing himself because of what he said. Shout out to Turnbuckle Chick. I'll say this. I lean a little bit more toward Raj Giri, and I think it's great. I enjoy a little trash talk and swagger. I enjoy proclaiming you're the absolute best. And while I respect everything that Turnbuckle Chick said, because she made some valid points, I don't know of any other way to measure who's doing better than who if it isn't based on who's working for the number one company, who's one of the top stars, And as a result, who's making top bucks? Now, Seth Rollins is not the most paid person in WWE, don't get me wrong, but he's a top star. And he's probably making more money than anybody on the indies. And anybody in New Japan, for the most part, and probably more than the majority of people in AEW. Is he making more than Will Ospreay? He probably is. That's what happens when you work for the big dogs. So I get that. I don't necessarily have an issue with him bringing that up. How do we measure who's better than who? You can't say so-and-so's a better wrestler than so-and-so because it's subjective. It's your opinion. But how do we get to the facts? How do we legitimately measure success as it relates to pro wrestling? At some point, we got to talk money. At some point, we got to talk about who's working for what promotion and what is the footprint of that promotion. If you were to combine all of the promotions in Japan, combine what they made in a year, I think WWE still beats them by at least $100 million. And that's just profit. If we were just taking the gross and not even worry about profit, WWE blows them out of the water. One single promotion can take every promotion in an entire nation and blow them out of the water. So, Will Ospreay is not going to win that round. You can give your opinion and say you think he's a better wrestler or he's just as well and all this other stuff. But bottom line, man, got to go to the bottom line. A lot of people are frustrated with me on Twitter because I have spoken up about a lot of these things. They're frustrated because my stance on Seth Rollins and what he said to Ospreay is that I don't have a problem with it and I actually support it. People are upset with me over this. As if their opinion on what's a 5-star match or their opinion on who a better wrestler is and their opinion on how good a promotion something else is even matters. It matters to you, but those aren't facts. You gotta go to the bottom line, man. Something that's not subjective like your opinion, but legitimately we can point to it and say that's the best. If there's a more accurate measure in the bottom line, aka who's making the most bucks, who's in the number one company, let me know. I'd love to hear it. Folks, you know that I enjoy interacting with people who disagree with me on things. And vice versa. I feel like, you can learn more from people who view things differently from you. That's how you get educated, right? A couple of people got upset with me on Twitter at Duke Loves Rasslin. They got upset because I called out somebody for being a hypocrite because they were going after Seth Rollins for what he said, yet they weren't as enthusiastic towards others who had taken crazy shots at WWE for an extended period of time. Everybody leapt to their defense. So-and-so is not a hypocrite. How dare you say that? As if you aren't allowed to point out facts because it's somebody that you like. Being a hypocrite, I'll tell you. Doesn't mean I don't like you. It just means on this topic, you're not being even. And I think we all suffer from that from time to time, and that's okay. But no one is immune from being told. When did we get to the point where we can't openly disagree with one another without the mob getting into it and getting upset about it? It's very strange. Very strange. I enjoy this stuff, man, because It's part of the fun. You know? My favorite wrestler can beat your favorite wrestler. This one is better than that one. It's part of the fun. A lot of people are calling me some kind of WWE stan or what have you, as if they don't understand or they haven't paid attention and seen all the times I've held WWE accountable for nonsense that they do. I don't have time to be complaining about WWE's creative and how because I don't like it, that means it's terrible and everybody should feel that way. The little kid over there and the New Day shirt and the Becky Lynch hat, they're having a good time at the show. They don't feel that way. And I'm pretty sure the WWE is marketing to them before they market to me. So no, I don't take issue with their creative, so to speak. I don't think that is the worst thing because I don't like it. You know what I take issue with? Women are paid the same as men in the WWE. The pay scale is totally different. Still, I take issue with that. I take issue with the union busting that the WWE has done. I take issue with that. Racist storylines. The fact that, Hulk Hogan is still involved in WWE. I take issue with those things. Those are tangible things you can sink your teeth into, and they're absolutes. These are facts. There's nothing subjective about the fact that women should be paid just as much as men. All men are created equal, allegedly, in America. There's no reason why the women can't be paid as much as the men. You're literally discriminating against an entire gender by not paying them equally. It's not like you're saying, a wrestler, you're just not good enough. You're saying all of you women aren't good enough, so we're not going to pay you as much. That's ridiculous. Doesn't make sense. You can sink your teeth into that. I can't sink my teeth into, I didn't like Raw this week. The creative blows. It sucks. I'm not, it's the worst thing ever. Everybody should feel that way. No, I can't sink my teeth into that. That's foolish. They just signed multi-billion-dollar deals. How am I? I would sound like a fool. Like an absolute fool. To sit here and claim that the product is so bad when they're making all the money that they're making. They're posting record profits. You sound like a fool when you say that. You can quote me on that one. You sound like a fool. It's a business. The business makes money. If they're making the most money, then maybe you don't understand the business model if you can't comprehend how something you don't like personally can still be so successful. You're not a business expert. You're a fool. When did your opinion become a fact? Well, Duke, when did your opinion become a fact? Well, my opinion is not a fact, per se. But I'm sure using more facts to arrive at the conclusions I'm at, and you're just sticking to what you think you know. It's exciting, though, Wrestling fandom. We got a potential quote-unquote war going on, even though WWE is crushing it. It's exciting. I just want them to pay women equally and stop union busting and take CTE more seriously and get away from the racist tropes and even figures. That's all I ask. Outside of that, I don't really have too many complaints. It is what it is. Join me next week, folks. Of course, I'm going to have some more excitement. We'll be going over Fyter Fest. More good stuff. Be kind to yourselves. Be kind to others. Take it away, Tony Schiavone.
Mr. Tony Schiavone, and we're desperately out of time on Duke Loves Wrestling.